Hello chess friends and welcome to your Chess channel and welcome back to our Queen's Gambit Declined series. So in this series we're following this very nice opening from White's and from Black's perspective, and today we're continuing with our Queen's Gambit Declined studies and the so-called Vienna Variation. The Vienna Variation we have explained so far with the important sidelines and with the most important tactical motifs of the opening, and today we're analyzing a new line which could be sort of your secret weapon if you're playing the game with the black pieces. In my opinion, you have to be really flexible when you're playing openings, because maybe if your response to e4 is maybe e5 and you face the Ruy Lopez, maybe you're stuck to the Murphy defense. You play the Murphy defense many times, but then your opponent prepares for you, and then suddenly he knows what you're doing. He saw many of your games on the internet. He prepared for particular position where he noticed that you're not playing in a good way. So then you have to find really a sideline for yourself, or maybe a different opening against e4. Maybe you can then stuck to the Berlin defense. So you have to have, I think, 2-3 opening lines prepared at home in order to surprise your opponent sometimes, because if you just stuck to one particular line, it's not so good. You could get smashed even by a lower rated player because he'll simply prepare for it. So that's why I wanted to show you a new method of the Vienna Variation of the Queen's Gambit Declined, which is in my opinion perfectly fine. The top grandmasters of these days, Jan Nepomniachtchi, Alireza Firouzja, Hikaru Nakamura, are playing this beautiful opening line, and it's a really cool method. It breaks a little bit the principles in chess, which is, I think, really mad, because many times White is not doesn't know this line and could get surprised by you with this beautiful method to play an early b5 move. I'll explain, of course, what's all about. Be prepared. In my opinion, this is really a beautiful sharp opening. So here let's reach now our 3 knights variation, because the 3 knights variation of the Queen's Gambit Declined was always our cornerstone position. After this move, knight to c3, now comes our actual Vienna Variation move, d takes c4. And okay, we have recently studied this line, e4, and in my previous analysis we have covered this bishop to b4 method, which is in my opinion still the best way here to go on. But what you could do here as an aggressive method is this line, b5, b5, really wild stuff. So after move b5, the idea is clear. We want to play b4, then of course deflect the knight from the defense of the e4 and simply grab the pawn. But this b5 move causes now, it's a provocative move really here by black. It causes now new structural problems after move e5. Okay, here after move e5, what you don't want to do is to play the move b4. Don't do that, because you get smashed immediately, because here e takes f6, you can maybe also take b takes c3. Here White could also take the pawn on g7, and you're thinking, okay, I'll take 2, here the pawn on b2, and probably I'll get a draw out of this. But that's exactly not working, because here White will simply promote. You can also promote, but then you get this tactical shot, queen to f8. You have to take it now with bishop to h6, a discovered attack. You have to play something like king to g8, and now the queen will be taken, and it's obviously a losing game here for black, because White is simply up a whole piece. So this is not something that you want to do. So b4, don't play that. So you have to play here instead of this move b4, knight to d5. And in the beginning it seems like a strange idea, and many of you are probably asking the question, dude, what you're talking about? You're giving up just the pawn on b5. You have a double pawn structure here on the c file. This is not good. Also the c4 now is a long-term weakness. Well, it's really a beautiful and brutal line that that you can really play and surprise your opponent, because now with the move knight to b6 we can notice many things. Let's stop and evaluate first of all the position by noticing the weaknesses in White's and also in Black's position. First of all, White's advantage, the main advantage, is here the small pawn chain d4 e5, which causes now a space advantage. You see White's pawn is already on your side of the board on the 5th rank, and that's something that we don't like, because when you create spaces, then White also know where he's going to attack, because you see many of these pieces, the queen, the knight, the bishop on e2. Maybe in some occasions, if White castles, also rook to e4, rook to g4 could be included. But obviously what you should never forget is that White is going to attack your king side because of this advanced pawn on the king side. You see the e pawn is on the king side, and obviously white is going to attack you there. But what you should not do is, of course, to castle into your opponent's attack. So that's why many occasions you will stay with the king in the center here, but you will many occasions also castle queen side. So many of you will say, dude, you're not normal. How are you going to castle on the queen side, because you have already your weakened pawn structure there? But believe me or not, this is actually working, because we can notice now that white has disadvantages, of course, with the e5 pawn, but has also disadvantages, which is also this d4 backward pawn. So now we have a structural weakness, this backward pawn on d4, but also there is a weak square here around the square d5. So what we should do always against the backward pawn is create a blockade. So now you see the knight on b6 is controlling the d5. After move bishop to b7, this bishop will also control the d5, and now with knight to c6, knight to b4, and knight to d5, we could have really a beautiful control of the square. So it's, I think, now a perfect blockade against the d5 square. But after potential bishop to b7, notice that this bishop is targeting also the g2 pawn. So now in the near future, as I said, our main goal is to play bishop to b7, develop knights, play something like queen to d7, and castle queen side. And then even some methods, I'll show you now a couple of cool methods how to play really this way. You have to even in some occasion to sacrifice just one pawn. Maybe you can play something like g5. Then if the pawn is taken, okay, you lost the pawn, you start to cry, but don't cry, because then after rook to g8, the g file could have opened, and you see now with the support of the bishop and the support of the rook, black could have really his fun and destroy white after white castles on the king side, because white will castle many times on the king side because he feels secured on the king side, especially because of his advanced pawn on the e file. So that's something I think that you have to notice. It's, I think, a playable line many times, as I said, played by the top attackers of these days, Firuza, Hikaru, Jan Nepomniachtchi, really beautiful players of these days. So as I said, try out this method, because I think it's something worth to study. Let's see now what happens if you castle kingside. In my opinion, this is not good. I wanted to show a really beautiful game played by Ding Liren against Jan-Krzysztof Duda. Here we have a 3 knights variation of the Queen's Gambit Declined. Now we play our Vienna Variation move, d takes c4, and now e4. Now here Duda played also the move b5. Here we have e5, knight to d5, and here after move knight to b5, knight to b6. So that's now the move order that we have to know. But now bishop to e2, knight to c6, kingside castling, and now here Ding Liren plays, I think, a beautiful method. He plays after move bishop to e7 the move queen to d2. I think the move queen to d2 is much better than the move bishop to e3. In my opinion, it's a playable move, because here, okay, the queen will probably come on d2 now, but actually there are not so many good squares, I think, for the queen. By playing the move queen to d2 and after kingside castling, you see the queen can be included into the attack. Now maybe after something like rook to b8, like Jan-Krzysztof Duda played, here we have knight to c3, we have f5, and now with queen to g3, notice that now also the idea of bishop to h6 is working. So from this point on, black is already, I think, in huge positional problems. So that's what I really never liked about this opening line when you castle kingside. As I said, many games are played in this way, many games are also won by black in this game, but I simply don't feel comfortable when I look at the storm against my king here. I don't have so many pieces in front of my king. As I said, I simply don't feel secured anymore in this position. So that's why I wanted to show you first this game that we have also studied in our intro video. It was the beautiful game played by Alexander Shimanov, in which I think he applied really the beautiful tactical ideas when you stay with the king in the center or when you castle queenside. So my suggestions, as I said, to castle out of your opponent's attack, don't castle kingside. So here in the continuation we have bishop to e2, so we have reached now a similar position, bishop to e7, queen to d2. You see also Shimanov's opponents try to sneak in with the queen to g3, to play actively with the bishop. The knight will come into the game. As I said, in some occasions even rook to e1, rook to e4, rook to g4 could be an opportunity. So the space advantage around the square e5 allows white really a comfortable game on the king side. But here Shimanov played bishop to b7. We have queen to f4, queen to d7, and now after bishop to e3, white is hoping for, white is waiting. Hey, dude, castle king side so I can attack you, but not. Shimanov, he played now a beautiful move g5 immediately, and white fell for the trap. Knight to g5 causes now a lost game immediately for white, because after bishop to g5 we have queen to g5, and now a beautiful tactical shot. In the game previously you saw that Liren retreated with the knight on c3 against Duda, because the knight is a little bit loose. Now the knight is hanging, and if you, for instance, move the knight, then you get rook to g8, and you simply tactically lost here around the square g2. So this is now this tactical shot that is present through the whole game in the Vienna variation, if in this b5 line. Here in this game, Shimanov's opponent took at least here the pawn. Now queen to c7, but the position really didn't change. It's simply losing here immediately. So as I said, I wanted to show again this game because we have seen this game already in our intro video, but I wanted to show because many times you want to apply this method to just sacrifice one pawn just in order to open the g file. That's now our attacking method. So I wanted to show you how this idea is working in a more complicated game. We have reached now the same position again. Here Jeffrey Zeong was the player now with the black pieces, played now the move g5. Here we had knight to g5, bishop to g5, queen to g5, and here after move knight to e7. Notice now again the same tactical motif, but here what white tried is now to lock simply the d file with the move d5. But now after move knight to d5, again nothing really changed, because even if you take here bishop to c4, then rook to g8 would happen, and again I think this position rook to b8, rook to g8, again I think black is having a good game. At least we can open the g file, then we can maybe liberate ourselves somehow, open the light square diagonal, and here the game is tactically over. So really brilliant ideas you have here. The tactical motif is, I think, present, as I said, through the whole game. You can apply it many times in this particular game. After move knight to d5, a4 was played by white. Here white tried here at least a4, a5, a6 to somehow attack the bishop, but now Jeffrey Thiong played this active move, rook to g8. We have queen to d2, and now a6, kicking with the knight, knight to d4, and now queenside castling. As I said, queenside castling is really a beautiful surprise element of this line. Many times you have to simply castle queenside. You see now the rooks are connected, and there are now really some wild things around the square. So we have here f3. Finally white is locking this diagonal, but now with knight to g6 we have bishop to c4, c5, kicking with the knight, knight to c2, and now a beautiful move here by Jeffrey Thiong, knight to h4, attacking simply the g2 weakness. In this game white tried the move knight to e1, but it's simply not working because of this tactical shot. Rook takes g2, because if you take with the knight, then you get the fork on f3. So here in this game Thiong's opponent tried queen takes g2, knight takes g2, knight takes g2, but now with queen to c7 black had now a completely winning endgame. So after a couple more moves white simply resigned. But as I said, let's go back again, the same method here. After move e4, let's now see the whole game. We played move b5, e5, knight to d5, knight to b6, protecting, bishop to e7, normal development. We're flexible, we're delaying kingside castling, because if we get challenged maybe too much here somewhere, still we have the flexibility to maybe castle kingside. We still don't have to decide immediately where we're going to castle. But now from knight to c6, the normal idea, bishop to b7, rook to d1. Many times you see also the move rook to d1 by white, because he has the weakness, he has the backward pawn on d4. We have now queen to d7, we have queen to f4, and now again this idea g5. Okay, white doesn't have to take. White can play also queen to g3, but in this game you see after move knight to g5, many times you see white falling for this, bishop to g5, and now knight to e7 liberates simply this long diagonal, and black had really a comfortable game. So let's see now another example. Again, this method, knight to b6, knight to c6, bishop to e7, bishop to b7, here queen to f4, and now queen to d7. Again, staying flexible, trying to castle queenside. So here, rook to d1, again the same position, now g5, and here white plays maybe queen to g3. He did here white doesn't want to castle. Now you castle simply queenside. This is now really beautiful. Still we have opportunities, of course, to liberate our long diagonal for the light square bishop, and still we can play here g4, h5, h4, so we can still be flexible on this side of the board. If white takes now, then as we said, we're simply placing one of the rooks on the g file, h6 then, and with the support of the light square bishop, again we can have some fun. So here I think white played a better game because white didn't take the pawn, white didn't allow black to open some files. So here the continuation, b3 was played, and the b3 is really cool because we are trying here from white's perspective also to open the queen side. Here c takes b3, a takes b3, and now a very important move, knight to d5. We should not worry, I think, so much here around the square a7, because in my opinion the only file in which we could lose maybe the game is the c file. If something gets here open on the c file, then I think the c7 could be an obvious target, because if you try something like knight to a7 now, then we'll simply take knight to a7, rook to a7, and now with knight to c3, you see we have sort of a small fork here. The rook has to move, we take, and now again we're pushing just the pawn further, and I think this is a good game now for black. We can still proceed by pushing the pawn. We can also try king to b8, at least kicking away the rook from this very important square. We can also try some ideas to somehow deflect the knight from the defense of the d4, take finally this pawn, include maybe the bishop into the game. So as I said, this is in my opinion a good position again for black. I wanted to show you how Jan Nepomniachtchi destroyed Magnus Carlsen already in this game. So we have again the 3 knights variation of the queen's Gambit Declined. Now I have removed d takes c4. We have the Vienna variation. Here Magnus Carlsen played the move e4 against Jan, and here Jan proceeded with this beautiful b5 move. So again e5. I'm showing you again this move just to for you to get the grip. Knight to d5, knight takes b5, knight to b6, knight to c6. We have kingside castling, bishop to e7. We have here queen to d2 by Magnus Carlsen. So you see Magnus also played this sort of Liren methods with queen to f4, queen to g3. We have bishop to b7, and now again rook to d1. So this position you face many times. We play now, of course, queen to d7. We're staying flexible, and we want now to castle queenside. We have here knight to c3 by Magnus. So you see he's retreating because, as we said, the knight is a little bit loose on the board, we have to admit it, so that's why retreating with the knight is also very important. So we have now knight to b4, controlling the d5 square as we wanted to get in the previous position. So a3, knight to d5, knight to e4. Here Magnus is also targeting the c5 square, so that's why here queen to c6 was played by Jan Nepomniachtchi. If now knight to c5, then bishop to c5, d takes c5, and here I think it's a decent game for black. Queen to c6 is going to happen again, and maybe again to try some ideas around the square g2. This is now again a beautiful setup. So here in the continuation of the game, after queen to c6, Magnus Carlsen tried rook to e1. We have queenside castling immediately by Jan Nepomniachtchi, really wild stuff, and now bishop to f1. Magnus is sensing that he could lose the battle here around the square g2, so at least he's getting one of these pieces into the defense. So we have now f5 by Jan Nepomniachtchi. He doesn't care here if something gets open, even if he loses some pawns, it doesn't matter for him because at least he's opening the files. We have here e takes f6, g takes f6 by Jan Nepomniachtchi, queen to e2, targeting of course now the weak pawn on e6. Here in the continuation we have king to b8, just improving the position of the king, bishop to e7, and now finally rook to g8. So this is now, I think, again a playable position here for black, although probably here knight to g3 is always a method to somehow at least lock the g file somehow, but with rook to d6 we can at least protect our e6 weakness. So it's, I think, so far at least a dynamic game here for black. So rook from a to c1, attacking further this weakness on c4. We have bishop to d6. We have now g3. If you try, of course, knight to d6, knight takes d6, and now you don't have any more this knight that you would love, of course, to play in front of the rook on the g file. So okay, maybe this is not the optimal square for the rook, but at least we're continuing with our main goal, which is the g2 weakness. As we said, this is now always our target. So after move rook bishop to d6, we have now g3 by Magnus, now f5, knight to d6. We have here c takes d6, and here after move bishop to g7 was played now rook to e8. Here Jan Nepomniachtchi had, I think, a good setup again with opportunities even to play something like f4. F4 is also perfectly fine. If, for instance, the g file gets opened, I would not love to play now the game here from white's perspective. So here knight to h4, we have queen to b5. We have a rook to g1 by Magnus Carlsen. Now queen to b3, of course, controlling for the light square. So we have bishop to c3, knight to f4. Finally, this idea to liberate everything. The queen is hanging, so we had here g takes f4. But now a beautiful move here by Jan Nepomniachtchi. He's attacking now both of these pieces. He has now also the pressure here, so it's now a much better position here for black. So we have now h3. Rook takes h4, bishop takes b7, king to b7, and now queen to f3 by Magnus Carlsen. But it doesn't matter. Here the king is perfectly fine on a6. Really brilliant game by Jan Nepomniachtchi. He is controlling now all of the light squares on the board, and the problem is, I think, a little bit this bad bishop situation in which the bishop cannot come into the game. Here Magnus tried a desperate move d5 just to include somehow the piece into the game, but here after move knight to d5, Magnus tried this tactical shot which didn't work. After queen to d5, we have rook to g6, again a new check, and now with queen to b5 the game is basically over. Here rook to d1 was played, and after trades of queens, it's a much better position for Jan Nepomniachtchi. He has now the rook for the bishop, and he can also take out this pawn, so it was simply game over. But you got the grip. Sometimes your opponent will play probably a different sideline, but the idea is clear. The g file attack supported by the light square bishop on b7. This is something that you have to know if you want to play this opening. It's, I think, a strategical and tactical concept that you play many times. As I said, maybe this bishop to b4 method in the beginning is slightly better that we have covered so far, but the b5 method can be really your surprise element. So let's see now another example when your opponent is trying something else. Again, we have the 3 knights variation of the Queen's Gambit Declined, d takes c4, Vienna Variation, b5. Here I wanted to show really also a beautiful gameplay by Levon Aronian. Here his opponent tried e5, knight to d5, knight to b5, knight to b6. So this is now again the same move order that we have seen before. Now what you could face here is a very annoying and an unpleasant move, queen to c2, attacking immediately the c4 pawn, and many times you see this move because maybe someone that didn't study this opening in a deeper way will try to attack a simply weakest. Now it's very important to stay active here. We have to play here knight to c6, because if bishop to c4 happens, now you have to know what you're doing. Now, first of all, we have to kick away the queen with the move knight to b4. Also, a6 could be an opportunity, but you have to notice also that in some occasions this idea is working. Bishop to e6, this discovered attack by the queen against the knight, so the knight could be lost. So that's why you have to be careful. So that's why we're playing first the move knight to b4, attacking the queen. We have a queen to e4 was played by Levon Aronian's opponent. And now rook to b8. Okay, here in this scenario, white prevented black from Carlsen queenside, which seems like a decent idea, but actually, if we count now, many times the queen has played already, and the queen is becoming now more and more of an object of the attack. Here, for instance, if you try bishop to e2, bishop to b7 could be an opportunity. Now the queen has to retreat, and now with a6, the knight has to retreat again. Bishop to f3, bishop to f3, and now queen to d4. It's, I think, a much better position. So use this time that you get by attacking the queen just in order to develop your pieces. In the continuation here, after move knight to c6, bishop to e3, could be also an opportunity, but now again with knight to b4, the queen gets attacked. Again, rook to b8 with bishop to b7, and here in this particular scenario, Levon Aronian's opponent tried queen to g4, but now he got the fork on c2 and it was game over. So as I said, your opponent could try to attack the pawn with queen to c2, but in my opinion it's not the best of lines. Even if he grabs the pawn, the activity that you get by chasing the queen a little bit all over the board is brutal. I think you get again the diagonal, you get the bishop activity, you can still kick away the knight. Again, I'm pointing out the d4 is a long-term weakness. We can always attack it. You see also bishop to f3 followed with queen to d4, then if you kick away the knight, it's an opportunity. So many ideas you have here, but don't worry so much about one pawn, because you get your activity, your pieces are dancing all over the board, you get some tempi against your opponent's pieces, so it's not, I think, something that should bother you, this queen to c2 line. So okay, let's see now also different idea that white could apply. After move d takes c4, after e4 b5, your opponent could play here after move knight to d5, knight to b5, so we have seen the same line. He could also play the move g3, and in my opinion this g3 move should be met with kingside castling, because it's not so easy now anymore for white to attack the kingside, because he has already weakened also his structure. Here we can play bishop to b7, and I wanted to show you a beautiful game that was played by Alexander Kostenyuk. Here bishop to g2, bishop to e7, and now kingside castling. I don't think that this method is working, because you see queen to d2, then queen to f4, and this queen to g3 method is not working, because we have already taken the square for the queen by playing the pawn there. So I simply like now black's position, because the pawn chain can always be broken with the move c5. So although we have here this double pawns on the c file, still this pawn structure can be improved with the potential c5 move. So here Alexander Kostenyuk played normal knight to d7 with the preparation to play knight to c5. Still we're staying very active on this diagonal. If now the bishops are traded, it doesn't matter, because when we watch now also this structure, many pawns are on dark square. So if the bishop comes on e3 here, the dark square bishop, it wouldn't be an optimal piece, because it's blocked out by its own pawn. So that's why you shouldn't mind if maybe the pawns are traded off. So we have here queen to d2, now c5, and I think this is now a good game here for black, because d5 is of course not a possibility, because we're controlling the square in a good way, so it's not possible. So here we had here rook to d1, c takes d4, and here Alexander Kostenyuk played a beautiful move, queen to c7, with the preparation to play maybe bishop to c5, knight to c5, knight to d3, and it's, I think, a good position, especially because of the weakness on d3. We had here bishop to f4, rook to d8, knight to b5, and here after queen to b8, it seems so that something went wrong, because white played here the knight on d6, but always remember that we have also somewhere to cement our position. Now after move bishop to d5, this is really a compact position around the square d5. Now it's even possible to maybe play something like this and maybe just push this pawn further. Also some ideas of knight to a4 could work, also attacking this one. Still something like maybe f6 is also working, because if e takes f6, maybe you could lose also the piece on d6. So many tactical possibilities. Here we had knight to g5, h6, we had knight to f7. This was simply a too rushed attack here by white. Rook to f7, knight to f7, king to f7, bishop to h3, trying to somehow include the bishop into the game, but now for bishop to c5, queen to d2, knight to f8 was played, protecting everything perfectly fine. We have queen to e2, and now after king to g8, rook from a to c1 was played, and now in this position after queen to b7, the game was basically over, because now black is simply taking over on the long diagonal. We had now bishop to g4, and after bishop to h1 in this position, Alexander Kostenyuk's opponent simply resigned. So that's not the point of this video, to now analyze every move that can happen. It's not how you should analyze your openings at home. I think it's very important to recognize the possibilities of white, and you see in this method, when you play g3, bishop to g2, okay, you are competing on the light square diagonal, but then I think this idea queen to d2, like we saw queen to f4, queen to g3, it's not working. So in my opinion, it's a slightly passive too passive way for white to go on, and you see now white got challenged because black cemented the position around the square d5. As we said, when we face this backward pawn, the blockade idea is perfectly fine. When we don't see this particular line like we saw maybe in this example played by Jan Nepomniachtchi, this is perfectly fine. Queen to d7 with preparation to queenside castling, and then some methods, some f5, f5, g5, h5, maybe just to open the g file, more maybe to include the bishop into the game, and I think you could have fun around the square g2. So okay, I hope that you understand these methods, and I hope you apply them in some of your games, because these are, in my opinion, really cool methods. Because if your opponent maybe is a beginner, he will get surprised for sure if you play maybe queenside castling instead of kingside castling. And as I said, probably kingside castling is sort of a suicide mission, because your opponent has already a beautiful activity there. Not that you lose the game immediately because you played kingside castling, but I think with queenside castling you have really fun, and you can have sort of a surprise element in your middle game stage. So okay, hope that you enjoyed the video. If you want to study more about the Queen's Gambit Declined Vienna Variation, check out our analysis. Here's the link of the whole playlist. And if you want to see also some other Queen's Gambit Declined methods, some other openings like the Harvest attack, like the Qg3 defense, and many more, check out also our whole playlist. Here's the link. And if you like this content, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and chess is the best, of course.